Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Hi, it's Nick, and for those who don't know me yet, I'm Open Research Advisor based in the library here at the University of Leeds. You're joining us in Season 3 of the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where I'll be speaking to colleagues from both the University of Leeds and from other universities and organisations about open research, what it is, how it's practiced in different disciplines, and how it relates to research culture. If you haven't already, you can catch up with Season 1, which was an introduction to the podcast and to my co-hosts, and Season 2 with my colleague Tony Bromley, who was in conversation with a number of presenters from the REDS conference of 2022. That's the Researcher Education and Development Scholarship International Conference held in Leeds. But now I'd like to introduce my guest for today, my colleague Dr Dorka Tamás, who's been working on a series of open research case studies here at Leeds. Dorka has recently been awarded her PhD from the University of Exeter, examining the presence of the supernatural in Sylvia Plath's poetry. She's presented in several conferences and symposia and is a co-founder of the Sylvia Plath Society. So hello, Dorka, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to talk here.
And now, Dorka, despite having worked with you for a while, since about May, I think, is it May? Yes. We've actually only met once, very recently and very briefly, on a bit of a flying trip to Leeds. So you're actually visiting, weren't you, to take part in an event at York. So maybe tell us a bit about that. But it was a bit of an epic journey because you're not actually based in Leeds. You had to come quite a long way.
Yes, I'm based in the southwest. So it was a long train journey. I was invited by the University of York's reproducibility network team to present in their it was an event on open research for early career researchers. And they saw me talking before in a similar event that Nick invited me to present on open access monographs. And so I ended up talking to a very different audience, similar people who are at the similar stage as me, being early career researchers. And my presentation was focusing on open access monographs for ECRs.
Mm-hmm. So you're becoming a bit of an expert in open research. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I think I definitely gained a lot of knowledge of open research through this job. And you know, it's such a vast area, and it's ever changing and developing. So it's hard to keep track of it, to be honest.
So maybe you can tell us a bit about your role here, as I've just introduced you doing this project for us on case studies. It's fair to say when you started as back in May, your knowledge about open research was perhaps a bit limited at that point. You've learned a lot since then.
Yes, definitely. I published an open access journal article. I think it was last year it was published. So I was familiar with the concept of open access because my university paid for a gold open access, which was very great, you know. But that was all my knowledge really of open research. Because I work in humanities and English, data is not something I come across, or not traditional quantitative data. So all of the other aspects of open research, like the open data, open code, preprints, was not something I had any knowledge of really. Mm-hmm. And sadly, it was not even a training in my PhD education, which I think Leeds is doing well, that it's really incorporated now into PGR training.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned your background's in English, and I said at the top though. So your PhD was in the supernatural and the Sylvia Plath poetry. Perhaps yes. Give you an opportunity. I know you like talking about Sylvia Plath. If you want to just tell us a little bit about that research and your PhD, and you're working on a monograph, I think, at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, so I'm trying to turn my PhD thesis into a monograph, which is a slow process, but hopefully in a couple of years' time you will see it. And Sylvia Plath was an American 20th century poet, and she tragically died very young. But my work was looking at the different ways in which her poetry engages with this umbrella term supernatural, which, included Cold War American McCarthyism, fairy tales, including the early modern witch hunt, including also some religious imageries, including narratives from classical sources such as Ovid's Metamorphoses and all other aspects, and how her poetry is using these the theoretical framework of the early modern witch hunt particularly, and how her writing informs us a lot about the Cold War period and the post-war period.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so obviously that is, you've already alluded to the fact that that's English, obviously, and poetry, which we wouldn't necessarily associate perhaps with data, as you'd said, and you didn't really have much training around open research, so you're aware of open access. Do you think, in retrospect, you would have benefited from more training around open research through your PhD?
Definitely. I think something that I never thought about my research material as data. And when I was working with archives, because I forgot to mention, I was working with a lot of archival materials, especially during the pandemic. These were all digitized archives that I had access from various universities, mainly from the Smith College in the US. So I did not have a good organizational system. I did not have a good research data management background. And now I'm sort of suffering the consequences of that, because my files are just sort of scattered with not real actual metadata, just very badly named files. So this is something I definitely would have benefited. And something that actually came up recently in one of the open research case study interviews I was conducting with somebody. This person mentioned that something that he would like to see more included in PGR training is helping people to understand sort of the process of publication, and also where to publish and what kind of deals the university has with publishers, because I know that Leeds has these contracts with certain publishers that you can publish open access. So that would be something I think that PhD students and me myself as well would have benefited.
Yeah. I mean, we do have workshops. So we do run workshops in the library, but it is such a big area, just open access, let alone open research. I mean, already you've mentioned a few different aspects. So you mentioned preprints, and we've talked a little bit about open data already, which we can expand on. And obviously these are things that I guess that you've picked up through the course of this project, the Open Research Case Studies project. So perhaps tell us a little bit about your role here at the university, albeit remote. As we've said, you're based on the South Coast, and some of the other things that you sort of learned through that project around the different practices associated with open research.
Yeah, sure. So I started working on the open research case studies with Chris, a colleague, in May, and we sort of distributed the faculties among ourselves. And I was paying attention. I was conducting.
Sorry to interrupt. We've got 8 faculties at Leeds. Is that right?
Yes.
It's quite a big university. I'm just making the.
Yes, we did have a lot of faculties, and we had also a couple of other topics, such as I was focusing on open education, and I also did a case study with the Leeds' special collection in terms of archives and digitization and accessibility. But I learned a lot, especially about STEM subjects, and how open research is relevant in other fields that are, not at all like mine. And it was very interesting to see how certain fields are so advanced, and certain practices have been, part of their research culture for a very long time. They might have not called it open data or, open access or something, but it was something part of their research culture just because their work is so collaborative. And I think particularly research or researchers that have to work together in a lab setting or work on codes together, it is essential to be transparent and open and follow certain protocols as well. But for other researchers like me, I guess, who works alone on a long research project, it's very different, and other parts are not too relevant. Like the mentioned open data. I don't work with other people's data. However, some people can consider the poems I worked with as a kind of data.
Yeah, well, so terminology is interesting. I mean, I have a background in English as well, and the sort of joke that I always make, working in a big research-intensive university, is, with a degree in English, it means I can read. That's my sort of only skill, really. So when you're dealing with different disciplines and different expertise, that can be quite challenging. So poetry is data. Often we talk about data, and people do think of it as spreadsheets of numbers in the STEM context, but as you say, that can be a wider range of materials in different disciplines. I wonder what Sylvia Plath would make of us regarding her poetry as data, though. Do you think she would have appreciated that?
I think she would find it very peculiar and probably would laugh about that.
And so you've obviously been interviewing different people around the university. So how many sort of case studies have you done between you and Chris, would you say? Do you know the number at the moment?
I don't know the exact number, but I think it's probably close to 60. So it's between like 50 to 60, I think.
Yeah, so a good number. I mean, I've seen a few of them, and just for anybody that is listening, you can access some of these case studies on the blog. We're still working on them, aren't we, Dorka? I know you're still working with Chris, and we'll release them over time as we get more together. And have you done any in English, for example, in your own discipline?
Yes, I did one with a researcher, Bridget Bennett. This was actually one of my first case studies I done. So I was very new to the whole, interviewing people part as well. And it was very interesting to see, because her research is also quite different to mine. And she was talking a lot about how we can make research outputs publicly available, not in terms of just academic dissemination, but I know that she was working with you, Nick, together to write a Wikipedia entry. And also she was mentioning other sort of outputs from her research, like not just conferences, but radio talks, blog, all these other outputs for public engagement that could be more accessible, I think, for the general public.
Yeah, no, I did work with Bridget on, as you say, a Wikipedia article, and I will actually be speaking to a Wikimedian as part of this podcast series as well. So a colleague called Martin Poulter. So yeah, we'll talk about Wikipedia and Wikimedia more generally in more detail later on. I'm just thinking back to when you said at the beginning. So you mentioned reproducibility, which is obviously a play on words for the Reproducibility Journal Club. And again, there'll be links in the show notes if people are unaware of reproducibility. But the concept of reproducibility, I can't say the word now because it's sort of I'm conflating it with reproducibility. But the concept of reproducibility and how and whether research and science can be reproduced. And so again, that's not perhaps something relevant to English in the same way as the STEM subjects, I guess.
Yes, that's very interesting. I guess in my specific area, it is very hard to conceive. But I was just having an interview the other day. Did an interview with someone who is more involved with digital humanities. And he works in translation studies, and he does a lot of textual-based analysis. And he was talking about reproducibility in the humanities. And the way in which he understood it, he gave this very good example, which will be in the case study I write up with Serge Sharov, his name, which was, his example was that if someone is analyzing a text and looking at, for example, if this text is a blog post, is this text a news article, is this text a form of propaganda, what sort of text is it? So, and then we can use definitions for each of these concepts of what kind of medium is this, and then we can base the textual analysis on that, and then we can sort of reproduced, that could be reproducible by other researchers as well, if we have exact definitions, the way in which we conduct our textual based analysis, which is, it's a nice idea and it's interesting. My area where I analyze poems, and the whole idea is that this is my reading, and there could be multiple meanings. I think reproducibility is a very difficult concept, but I think I'm sure that there will be a way in which we can make that useful.
And did you discuss that with colleagues in the other disciplines? I mean, what was your process for these case studies? Did you have a sort of standard process, whether you were talking to somebody in English or in chemistry, or I know you didn't do chemistry, but in terms of different disciplines, how did you actually approach the project?
Yes, we did. We did have a lot of questions that were sort of set questions for all people. I like to start the interviews with general questions, like asking them, what does open research mean to you? Where do you deposit your work? Does open research inform your teaching practices? And then going into different aspects of open research that are relevant for the particular researcher and the particular area of study. For example, preprints. For some people that would be quite relevant and very much the thing that they do in the field. For some people, it's not something they engage with. And I would ask questions about their attitudes towards open access, about what kind of data they work with, about pre-registration. That tended to be, for me, something that only one or two person talked about. So
I'm just, perhaps you could describe what pre-registration is, because I'm, as you say, did you encounter colleagues that hadn't heard of that term, didn't know what that was?
Yes, actually, quite a lot of people did not hear about pre-registration. So pre-registration comes from the field of psychology. It basically helps you to make your research process transparent and accountable. So you would pre-register your protocol and methods of data collection in a particular website. They have certain repositories and websites where you can upload your pre-registrations, as I mentioned, like the protocol. And then once you do your data collection and data analysis, people can also read your pre-registration and protocol and held your research accountable for that you were doing what you said that you are doing.
Yeah, and it's because, again, pre-registration is something that I've learned about relatively recently. And as you say, it's certainly not, it's come from psychology. And I know I've spoken to a lot of colleagues in different disciplines who can see how it would apply to their research, but I think it's got a long way to go in terms of, application in other disciplines.
Yeah, actually, I talked to somebody not long ago who said he was talking about pre-registration and how it's really relevant in their field in terms of ethical approval that they need to gain for doing medical research. And he mentioned that once he found a discrepancy between the pre-registration and the actual research of an author, and he contacted with the editors of the journal about that, and that he got a complaint from the author.
Oh, right. So was there any resolution to that you were?
Yeah, I mean, he said that he's happy about it, that he got a complaint, because at least it means that it worked and something happened and it wasn't just covered up.
Yeah. So that, again, that's exactly the point, isn't it, in terms of transparency and making that entirely transparent.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned some of the components of open research that you've sort of come across, pre-registration, so preprints, and again, preprints are versions of papers that are before they go through peer review.
Yes, they have been submitted for journals and they haven't been peer reviewed yet. So there are different repositories. A lot of people mentioned archive, archive.org, which seem to be a place where people put up preprints. There are different versions of this, like bioarchive, which is specific for the field of biology. There's medarchives, specific for medical sciences.
And we talked about open data, but I suppose one of the issues that we come across is that not all data can be open. I mean, do you find people concerned about, I mean, medical is a good example, where data about people's medical records can't necessarily be open. Was that something that came up?
I talked to people who work with human data who actually produce open data sets. It's obviously has to be anonymized and completely remove any data that can re-identify a person. But if it's so there are lots of people I talk to who deposit open data sets or use other people's open data. There are people I talk to who do not work with human participants, and therefore they don't have any ethical concerns really about their data sets being open. I think it is just a matter of you have to do it right, which involves a lot of work, and lots of people rather bring up the idea of making useful metadata so that other people can use it, and that's a long and timely process to do.
Yeah. And did you get much of a sense through these case studies of what the barriers are to practicing open research? I mean, I'm assuming I think there are barriers. Would you say, to people actually practicing this stuff?
Yes, I think there are barriers. There is numerous barriers. One thing, I guess, it's not sort of a barrier, but I think this is important to mention, that there are lots of people who practice open research, but they are not necessarily familiar with the terminologies. So I think just getting that communication across can be challenging in itself, to almost educate researchers in this something, because I think researchers do so many things and involved in so many projects and teaching as well. So even just having the right terminologies for people, because sometimes I would approach people for interviews and they would say, I don't do open research, and then they clearly have open access publications and all other things. So I think it's one challenge, as I said, is the terminology and having that communication for researchers. I think another aspect is having because obviously there are a lot of fundings for now, for example, open access that is now by the UKRI. Journal articles have to be open access, which are UKRI funded, and from 2024 monographs have to be also open access. But I think the question also comes in what happens with those people who do not have access to these funds, particularly precarious staff and early career researchers or other research that I also talked to somebody who does not have really UKRI funded research. His research comes from elsewhere, the funding comes from elsewhere. So what happens with these other aspects of research? Because if it's only one aspect that is supported really by money, that is the UKRI funded research, that can, I think, create a new sort of hierarchy between publications and researchers themselves and institutions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And did you speak to anybody outside the university? Did you speak to somebody from Octopus? Have I made that up? Or
yes, I did have a couple of interviews where I talked to external participants, like Alex Freeman, who you will do an interview.
Yeah, so I'm going to be that's it's just reminding me that you'd already spoken to Alex. So Alex Freeman will be interviewing on this podcast as well. He might already be there if you have a look. Sorry, Dorka. So you spoke to Alex?
Yes, I spoke to Alex and we discussed Octopus as a new platform for research dissemination. And I also did another external interview with someone who did an exhibition at the Cultural Institute at Leeds. So he is the head of English in the University of Huddersfield. And because of his research interest and archives available at Leeds, he was he was managing this exhibition at the Cultural Institute, which is a different form of public engagement and research dissemination.
Okay, great. And so you've mentioned it probably going on for 60 separate case studies now. I did mention there's a few of them on the blog at the moment, but when can we expect to see more of these? I mean, I'll probably link some in the show notes for this, I think. But I know you're still working on them, aren't you, in terms of actually getting them signed off by the interviewees and that kind of thing?
I think by the time this podcast episode comes out, there will be probably a lot more available on the blog post, and hopefully soon after in other resources like the University of Leeds' library website.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still working on a couple of case studies. I will have one actually next week, and I had one yesterday as well. But a lot of the people I interviewed, they are very happy to help, and they're very happy to distribute the case studies and have a CC BY Creative Commons license on the case studies.
Yeah. So as I say, but we'll be disseminating these, and we've also been liaising a little bit, haven't we, with UKRN? So they've released their own case studies recently that, again, I'll link in the show notes. I haven't actually managed to have a look at them myself yet. Have you had much of a look at those case studies?
Yes, so they're also collecting, the UKRN is also collecting case studies on open research. And they also link various universities' open research case studies. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of ours will be on their website as well. They're very interesting because you can really see the different approach they took, or different institutions took. I think a lot of ours is very in-depth, while a lot of the UKRN case studies are sort of a short summary of a certain research area with little anonymized quotes from particular researchers.
Yeah. So as I say, they will be linked in the show notes, and just to emphasize really that you and all the work that you and Chris have been doing here at Leeds, and in liaison with myself and other colleagues, we're just exploring, aren't we, really, what open research means in different disciplines, and really trying to communicate the benefits and the challenges in different disciplines and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I suppose we've been talking for quite a while now. What's next for you? You're gonna. We're hoping you'll stay with us for a little while longer, but longer term, do you plan to continue working in academia? Is that your long-term goal?
Yes. As much as there are many issues in the institutional side of academia, I love teaching, I love researching, I really enjoy working on the case studies and getting to know other fields and having this other type of knowledge that not necessarily on my research subject. And as I said, I'm working on my first monograph. I'm still participating in conferences, trying to do sort of other research as well, doing other public engagement events, participating in various reading groups, organizing conference. So, I'm kind of busy, but I would love to continue working as well in Leeds.
And I guess some of that is it open research? I mean, I mentioned at the top that you're the co-founder of the Sylvia Plath Society. I mean, blog posts and conferences. I mean, that's open research, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I think we can definitely think about it in that way. And I'm part of a reading group called it's a Gothic literary reading group called the Haunted Shores, and we have a monthly reading group where everyone is invited to join, and we have people joining from US, Australia, some people in the UK who are not research staff but are sort of academic support staff like you or like me at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us today. And if people do want to get in touch with you either about Sylvia Plath or the supernatural or open research or the case studies, I'll make sure that your details are in the show notes associated with this recording, and they can find you on Twitter, can't they, and various other places. So we'll link that in the show notes. So thanks, Dorka. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Email us at academicdev@leeds.ac.uk. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.